So we live in a moment where we can theoretically be biologically dead, but at the same time socially active and virtually present. So yes, digital immortality is a relatively new term used to describe a relatively new phenomenon, which is our post-mortem presence or activity in the digital realm, enabled by new technologies, especially AI.
Would you say that it will be best to be used and as a almost like a prescription method from an expert?
Um, it's also interesting that during our research in Poland and India, people also quite often return to this idea that uh, they would be ready to use this technology, but under the control of psychologists and psychiatrists. Because what people are scared of is becoming addicted. And the comparison of grief bots to drugs appears quite often. Um, People are scared of being manipulated and addicted because this technology is, by definition, designed to keep you engaged. So, what I'm learning from this conversation is that it's not as simple as saying, okay, I'm a believer and I adhere to a certain religious view, so I will uh, reject the idea of digital immortality. Um, and I think a range of factors influence the level of acceptance of these technologies, such as, first and foremost, how we frame this. Because if we present these technologies as a, let's say, therapeutic tool,
Me, Cassia, a researcher at the Leverhulme Center of the Future Intelligence at the University of Cambridge. She's known as the principal investigator and a key member of the International Scientific Consortium at Cambridge University. She's one of the 19 elite researchers awarded by her Schmidt Science through the AI 2050. She dedicated her life of solving AI. Her expertise has also earned her recognition by the British Academy under the prestige Global Visa. Cassie's work is at the forefront of technology and philosophical injuries, exploring how AI will shape humanity with the current technology and beyond. I'm extremely excited to have an amazing conversation with her. Today we sat down discussing digital immortality, a topic that many are unaware of, but yet will affect our future, being a man of faith or not. These are the conversations that I strongly believe we need to have and prepare the future by educating ourselves. And we discussed what is digital immortality, any government regulation concerning this topic, how does digital immortality will potentially affect people's grieving process, the mental and the spiritual effect of digital mortality for believers and non-believers, and how we can make use of this or not. Why is digital immortality is widely embraced in a Western society? How does the deceased information will be shared with this company? The psychological effect of interacting with this digital representation of a deceased person, especially for the young people. How would this digital immortality affect people with terminal illness? Would it push them to self-sacrifice, to kill themselves? Should this be a prescription from the professional instead of an option for anyone to use? So I think as a Christian, for those people of faith, we need to be wise and understand to learn what is happening around us globally in technology, so in society. All this information helps us to be fully equipped and to face life as believers. So without further ado, this is a wonderful conversation I'm looking forward to learn alongside you. So if you are new here, please like and subscribe. Click that notification bell so that every videos you'll be aware and notify as soon as we drop. So this is a family. Welcome to the Balance Talk with Lodi, a channel where we like to discuss science, technology, philosophy, and most importantly, God. So without further ado, let's jump to the video. I'll see you at the end. So if there is a one way to describe digital immortality to someone who isn't fully aware of what this concept is about, how would you phrase it to kind of simplify the concept?
So, yes, digital immortality is a relatively new term used to describe a relatively new phenomenon, which is our post-mortem presence or activity in the digital realm enabled by new technologies, especially AI. Uh, so, with the current state of technology, we can create or recreate ourselves in the form of post-mortem avatars, and these simulations can stay with our family and friends and communicate on our behalf. So we live in a moment where we can theoretically be biologically dead, but at the same time socially active and virtually present. And I borrowed this phrase from Deborah Bassett, but I think it's really nicely described the moment we are right now and the challenges, the whole spectrum of challenges that these technologies present to us.
It's very fascinating because when we're looking about 20 years ago or even 30 years ago, we used to have like this brick phone, like it was about this size, you're carrying in your ear like this. And now we're talking about a level of technology that people are, potentially preserving their conscience, subconscious to a digital format. And I'm always, you said something rec- no long ago about a cultural element. And would you say that this concept of digital immortality is more embraced to like a Western and also in particular Anglophone speaking country? And why is that if that's the case?
hmm So the simple answer to this question is that the majority of these commercial companies offering digital immortality originate in the United States. So it seems that USA seems to be the epicenter for incubating this idea and distributing this narrative of our possible presence after death. And these narratives of obviously convey some ideas and preconceptions, such as, for example, the notion that our postmortem presence can be part of digital market, and we have this term digital afterlife industry. So we tend to discuss this phenomenon within a distinctly Western bubble, and this unfortunately, in turn, closes the research, closes the reception, closes regulation of digital immortality within specific Western loop. And this perpetuates the false impression that we all share the same desires, share the same feelings about this, and that we all constitute this kind of uh, universal we, um, uh, which is in part a product of digital environment. So in my research, I'm trying to understand how people from different cultural settings perceive this idea, uh, and uh, and I ask the question, what happens when we take the idea of post-mortem avatars out of the American context and explore it in different cultural settings, such as in Poland, India, and China? And I'm looking for micro narratives instead of focusing on the dominant Anglophone narrative.
Mm. That's very interesting because if you take that concept outside of the United States, the countries that you named, India, China, are very much the religious in a way that can maybe change the way how that product can be marketed or even to introduce because how they view death also can changes. For example, in India, there's a lot of multiple belief of certain gods, and death is kind of perceived completely different. And also likewise in China. And my question will be, how have you done it? Would you predict that method? How do you think it will be embraced? Would you think it will be naturally embraced, or it be
You mean
great?
You mean method for researching this, or the way to change the product of digital immortality in a
Like, do you think it will be kind of not received with open heart compared to like the Western society?
hmm Um, so it's hard to predict. I'm still in the midst of this research. So I have some impressions, and So I'll give you an example from Poland. In November 2024, we conducted our first research study in Poland with both experts and non-experts. Experts, so people representing different deaf-related fields, like academic, artists, palliative care professionals, but also people from funeral industry, and also with non-experts. And we discussed the idea of digital immortality. And Poland is predominantly a Roman Catholic country with Catholicism deeply intertwined with its cultural heritage, history. So you might expect that people would be very or quite reluctant to imagine using these technologies in a religious context. Uh, but the situation, I would say, is not so black and white. One of the experts we spoke uh, uh, during this workshop was an engineer involved in developing ChatGPT as an assistant in one of the Polish parishes in Poznan. So visitors or people can just simply walk in at any time and ask GPT for specific guidance or excerpts from the Bible or help with writing. So, what I'm learning from this conversation is that it's not as simple as saying, okay, I am a believer and I adhere to a certain religious view, so I will uh, reject the idea of digital immortality. Um, and I think a range of factors influence the level of acceptance of these technologies, such as first and foremost, how we frame this. Because if we present these technologies as a, let's say, therapeutic tool or a companionship or a source of knowledge or just simply an interactive archive, I think there is no direct contradiction with belief in an afterlife or any religious views. So I think it very much depends on how we frame this and how we name it.
Yeah, that's interesting because I know obviously Poland, yeah, as you said, the culture is kind of religion is also more like the fabric also of the culture. And
Mhm.
surprisingly, I'll be really interested to know how this idea is being introduced and how such a culture will kind of be open to it. And it'll be, you know, it'll be quite interesting study to see because I know how religious people are very much rigid in their ways of believing. For example, death in itself, it's such a secret, like a sacred thing. You know, for people of faith, it's almost like a transition to a different realm.
Mm.
It's a rest, no longer wanting to be in this realm, where you have to pay bills and you're living in London, you're paying gas, electricity with terrible weather. And imagining trying to get to live in this reality again. But that's really interesting. So, do you think I think in terms of the deceased, do you think like the data, how do you think this data will be shared with like the companies?
Mhm. So in general, what you need to do is just simply grant access to your data to the company. So this includes messages, your voice recordings, video recordings, and the more data you provide, the more accurate this representation will be. And AI analyzes this data, makes connection between different pieces of information, and extrapolates the best possible response on your behalf. So when the post-mortem avatar speaks, doesn't mean that your grandfather or your son is actually speaking, but it's rather AI uh, that is predicting what the person might have said in this particular moment or context. Um, but yes, the more data, the better the representation can become.
Are there some government regulation with this digital mortality that's are being yet maybe not applied yet, maybe looking at, for example, in a state where it's more prevalent?
Mm, yeah, we wish there were regulations that these companies had to follow, but unfortunately, at the moment, it's not the case. As I mentioned, it's a very new phenomenon, and with the current pace of technology development, regulations unfortunately remain far behind. So the truth is that we don't have sufficient regulations at either national nor global level that could apply to digital immortality directly, which means that mostly how these products are shaped, it's an arbitrary decision made by creators of this technology, which obviously is very, very alarming. Um, and even when we consider when considering the European context, we have GDPR, so General Data Protection Regulation, that regulates aspects of privacy and the use of personal data. However, this not apply to postmortem data and the postmortem privacy. So there is a significant gap here, and issues such as, for example, how to obtain meaningful consent for using data from data donor or third parties who use data to create postmortem avatars, or how to protect privacy after death, or what responsibilities should be placed on the creators of these technologies. These things, these matters remain unresolved. So there's still a lot to take care of.
Yeah. And how is this research being funded, if you don't mind asking? Obviously, very particular. Is it being funded by the by a scientist or by some major tech company or some billionaires over there just wanted to explore this?
Yes, so this research is funded by Schmidt Sciences, and Schmidt Sciences is the foundation, American foundation, that was created by Eric Schmidt, one of the founder of and director of Google. So these are private money which are invested in research on AI and ethics of AI.
And how are they benefiting from this in particular? This was not part of my question, but I find interesting. How are they benefiting from that? Obviously, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is costing us a tremendous amount of
So I think they just to make difference, and they invest in us scientists around the world to help us leverage our research and help us provide the most sufficient, the most um, mm, yeah, the best solution, because we are in a very risky, in the middle of a very risky technocultural experiment with AI at the moment. So I think, yeah, they just invest money to help reshape this world and to make it more safety place for us to live in.
And how big is your community? Because it's a very niche industry that you're working. Would you say that
Mm.
it's you are all very much like it's a small community of these principal investigators or that are working in this particular sector of like digital mortality?
Mhm. So 10 years ago, definitely it was a niche. And it was even very hard for me to convince my doctoral committee in Poland when I was doing my PhD that this can be the topic of my dissertation,
Yeah.
because they were very, very skeptical.
Yeah.
But after a decade, I think that this community is growing. As I mentioned, we have this term digital afterlife industry, which tells volumes about the moment where we are. So it's not a niche, but it's a separate autonomous branch. Um, um, and there are many researchers representing very different backgrounds, sociology, cultural studies, AI ethics. around the world who are working on this topic right now.
Okay, so the different sectors are also kind of coming to contribute in this um research,
Yes,
trying to find insight in different aspects of them. Okay. That leads me to
yes, definitely. Yeah.
a question like, what is your thoughts on like digital simulation of, say, for example, to children, those who are too young, maybe, or to understand them.
Mm.
For example, also, what can I say? For example, someone who have lost their parents, a very young age, but
Hmm.
yeah, but they have left them this digital simulation and something that to interact with, because obviously their brain are yet to fully develop, and they become accustomed to this form of parenting. And what's your thought on that?
So I have a very clear view on this particular aspect. And in short, I think that children shouldn't be exposed to these technologies for the reason you mentioned. I think children are not absolutely ready to interact with these technologies. And it's one of the recommendations that we presented in our article with Dr. Tomasz Kolanek, my colleague from the CFI. Uh, uh, we the impact of these technologies on grieving process at the moment. And I think we should protect the most vulnerable groups, and children is definitely this group. Um, and on a more personal note, I am a mom, and I have a 7-year-old little guy, cute and clever. Um, and I think that so this issue is very close to my heart, and I think exposing him to these technologies would be um, absolutely misleading, but also it can potentially be devastating. Um, and I can imagine a situation because I live partially in Poland and partially in Cambridge, and I'm traveling a lot back and forth. So we get used um, uh, to see each other on the screens and communicate via different platforms like WhatsApp or Zoom. So I can imagine that if something were to happen to me one day, I think theoretically my husband could extend the situation and could like create a postmortem avatar of me to help our son to cope with this. He would never do that to him,
Yeah.
that's for sure. But I think that that would be very very hard for him to yeah, to interact with this, and um, this this technology has potential to absolutely distort understanding of reality.
Mm.
Um, and I also think that we should try to learn ourselves, but also teach our children how to lose better, and not necessarily always trying to find a solution, especially solutions that are delusive or potentially harmful.
So it's part of nature to allow certain things to happen and to allow, I guess that will lead me. Do you think that is would affect the grieving process of an individual to basically recover at some point?
Yeah. So the we don't know yet for sure, but the entire community working in this field agrees that we should be very cautious here and careful. We don't have evidence based empirical research at the moment, uh, and it's because of at least few reasons. First, because as I said, it's a very new phenomenon, and this has to do with the pace at which academia works. So it usually takes 3 to 5 years from securing funding for the study to publishing your findings. So we are still waiting for some empirical based research. And also, it's relatively difficult to do research here because we need to invite to this research people who are coping with grief, so that it's ethically sensitive matter. So we don't have a clear understanding of how these technologies influence our grieving process. But as I said, we should be very, very careful.
But you said something about like digital, like it'll be difficult to convince someone who's currently grieving to be
Hmm.
to be interviewed, or maybe just to kind of find out more about how digital immortality can affect them, maybe to allow them to go through that process. If there was a way, or if there is a strategy in place already, what is it that you guys are planning to gather those research, like with an individual, if there is one, or if there isn't, how to do it? At least just
Yeah. So I think, first of all, what needs to be said is that we have very different theories around grief and grieving. And one stream of understanding about what happens to us when we are coping with loss uh, comes from, I would say, the Freudian line. So Sigmund Freud, in his very popular essay, Mourning and Melancholia, suggests that the so-called work of grief should focus on letting go of the beloved object. And we have this idea that that's the goal of grieving, is to let go. But the more recent approach, which emerged around 90s, suggests that it's not necessarily the case. And for example, the theory of continuing bonds tell us that we can continue our relationship with deceased loved ones, and that it's completely normal phenomenon. And it doesn't mean that it leads you to be stuck in an illusory state of the mind, that, but it's rather about negotiating this relationship after death. Um, Grief is a journey, and it's not the same for everyone. There are ups and downs. No particular order of stages of checkpoints that we need to meet in order to process it properly. So I think that this theory of continuing bonds, it's shed some light on how we can use these technologies, and also in our research with non-experts in Poland and in India. So what we do is that we invite our participants over dinner, and the focus groups is called Immortality Over Dinner. And we ask them about their preferences, their thoughts on different death-related, immortality-related issues. And also during this conversation, we ask our participants about their ways of maintaining relationship with the deceased. And sometimes it's a song that brings memories. Sometimes it's a cooking meal according to a deceased loved one's recipe. Sometimes it's object. Sometimes it's a space. And now the question is how we can use AI to further facilitate this contact, and how do we imbue this technology with meaning and purpose, because that's the most important thing.
would you say that if it was to become more of a mainstream way of use, would you say that it will be best to be used and as a almost like a prescription method from an expert?
Mm. Yes, that's a very interesting question, and it was first Nora Lindemann in academic literature that suggested the idea of using these technologies and perceiving these technologies as medical devices that should be prescribed by experts like psychologists or psychiatrists. Um, and It's also interesting that during our research in Poland and India, people also quite often return to this idea that uh, they would be ready to use this technology, but under the control of psychologists and psychiatrists. Because what people are scared of is becoming addicted. And the comparison of grief bots to drugs appears quite often. Um, People are scared of being manipulated and addicted because this technology is by definition designed to keep you engaged. And that's the business model behind this, right? Why people are asking whether this technology could be used in a therapeutic setting as a tool for support. But as I said, under the control and in a very carefully designed circumstances.
That's really because I have a background in the UX UI design. There's a really eh, there's a lot of psychology that goes behind it on trying to develop certain features to really hook the the viewer to remain
Mhm.
there. And that that's very dangerous because obviously if those companies, the objective are not just to help the person but also to monetize it, to trying to become more of a use, like a dependent, become more something dependent rather than a need or maybe a necessity, something that is used for a certain amount of time and put aside. So that's very
Mhm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that this notion of prescription and using this as a medical tool, it's a very interesting concept that should be further explored by academics. And we need more research. Maybe that's the way to make these technologies simply safe and to protect users from potential negative consequences.
what when I was thinking about it, and I was thinking more from a parenting viewpoint, and someone who also maybe scoring who's have some sort of a terminal illness, because as you're suffering, you maybe want to you empathize for the people that are around you, and you want to um cater for them. You want to look after them, and that could also lead to someone who has a terminal illness. Maybe do you think that could also send them to a point to try to terminate the life early to prevent any extra feeling of being a burden to people?
It's a very complex situation because we've already heard in media stories about people who actually use this technology to deal with situation of illness, and uh, I think it can be a therapeutic tool, and as long as it works for you, that's okay. Um, and as long as it can support a person in the end of life situation, um, that's that's great. But I think I would try to problematize it a bit because we usually think when we think about digital immortality, we usually think only from the perspective of so-called data donor, so the person who is trying to create this post-mortem avatar. And what we are missing um, is family and friends. So something that is created or can be therapeutic for the person who's creating this avatar may not be uh, as therapeutic for the intended users. So people who will be using this
Yeah.
avatar article that I mentioned already with Dr. Tomasz Holanek, we suggested the idea of something that we called the principle of so I mentioned the principle of mutual consent. What we are trying to draw attention to is that digital immortality is not a one man show, but it involves very different stakeholders, and we need to try to create a situation that is comfortable for both sides. I mean, for data donors, so person who is creating this avatar, but also for the intended users, family, friends, because for them, for some of them, it might be great to have such a technology, and they might feel that it's okay to go through the greeting process with AI. But for some, it can be additional emotional burden, and we need to take care also of these people.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I think it's from a person who's accepting to be to go through this digital mortality, obviously not considering also the aspect of the recipient, the person that's dealing with
Mhm.
the trauma that they may have to deal with. I was reading an article, I don't know if it was the same. It was I think it was that doctor stated something like, as is someone who may not want to participate in this uh this experience. They might be made feel guilty because of you know that pressure.
Absolutely, I agree. It's really hard. It's a very complex and sensitive area. So if we know that this person created this avatar for us and we are not ready to use it, we have this mixed feelings because on the one hand, our is our perception and our feelings, but on the other hand, this will of someone who we love. So very conflicting interests.
Do you think this could also create like a data breach and maybe increase crime rates in the future?
Mhm.
It can be like a market for dark black markets, people trying to in some way.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. And well, possibly I can imagine this dystopian future. We live in the deep fake era, where it's quite easy to impersonate someone. And so I can imagine that this could happen also within the digital afterlife industry, and we use the chatbots to allow us to commit some kind of crime. So maybe at some point we will need to create, I don't know, maybe a register of dead bots so you can easily check whether this entity not only whether it's a machine or whether it's a human, but it's also whether um, it used to be a real living person. Maybe this should be controlled by some institution or some different, I don't know. That's just an idea how to protect us from situations like this.
I can imagine even we know about life insurance. There's
Mm.
stories about a family member would try to cause some sort of like kill the person just because of for like, do you think if it gets to a point that it become very lucrative, that can
Mm.
also maybe be a point that people to pay attention to?
Unfortunately, I think that might be true. And as long as you can get some money from this, it will be tempting to some people to try to use this.
Okay. And my last question will be, should donors or should companies really be providing the full risk and information about, almost like a cigarette package, like try
Yes.
stating like these are the risks, this and this, these are the pros and cons of this product.
Yes, absolutely. I think I'm in favor of solutions like this. And I think that we really should make the users aware of a range of potential risks. But also we should make sure that users are aware that these technologies are neither conscious nor sentient. Um, because the whole situation is created to um, to convince the user that you can connect to your depth. And I think what we need to do as a community working in this field is to find a way to protect users. And I think this should be a blend of well thought out regulation and design solutions.
It's a significant portion of population are open to the concept of digital immortality, with like a 35% of responding with the Casper study, with expressing the acceptance of recreating a deceased person. So I think it's people are actually more open to it than I presume at first, you know. And obviously there's a significant number of people who are still resisting to the idea. But I think it looks like it just depends on how, as you said early, it's marketed and presented to an individual or to a society. Um, but I guess my last question would be: are you a yes to the idea or a no? Or maybe the
For
green.
myself
Yeah.
or in general? For myself, right?
So.
Uh, it's no. I would say even hard no.
I absolutely had no.
No.
So what about in this society and in general?
So I think I've already know enough to say that I'm not interested in doing this for myself. But also, I mentioned this idea of mutual consent, and I'm aware of the fact that it's not only me who should decide whether to create it, because by the end of the day, I created having in mind users, intended users of the technology. So potentially, I don't know, my husband or my child, and I just don't want them to be exposed to this technology because I know that it's potentially can be very harmful.
Yeah,
And it's still a very risky experiment to be engaged in.
absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this interview, and then you provided me with so much information, something that to look up to in the future. Again, I really appreciate. How do you say your full name? I have to try at least.
Okay, so Katarzyna,
Katarzyna
perfect. Nowaczyk,
Nowaczyk
perfect. Basińska,
Basińska. Katarzyna
yes,
Basińska.
perfect. Yeah,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me.